Grace, peace, and welcome to Podcast of the Wills, a podcast that treats Star Wars like a sacred text. My name is Nick Milkey, and we are live. We are live on Sunday afternoon. And let me tell you a funny story real quick. Here's what you shouldn't do. You shouldn't let somebody who lives in Alabama be in charge of anything that has to deal with international time zones, because I am guaranteed to get it wrong somewhere along the way. We're on early on a Sunday, which is fun. I hope we're going to have some friends hanging out with us in the live chat, and we're going to talk Star Wars. And despite the early start, we're all going to get to have fun. We're going to get to have an amazing guest that I'm really excited about. So I'm excited that y'all are here. I'm glad that we are here to do this on a Sunday afternoon. I want to send a shout out to my kids who normally they don't get to watch the show because I'm on after they have gone to bed. So Harper, Lily, Wren, and Laura Kelly. Dad says hello from the garage. You're in the house. But we're glad that y'all are watching. We're glad that everybody is tuned in this afternoon because I have an amazing guest, and I'm going to get right into it because he's so much fun. I've heard him on Around the Galaxy. I've heard him on the Holo Chronicles show. I follow him on Twitter. There's always laughs. There's always positivity and fun that goes with my guest, Marshall Julius. Marshall is an author. He wrote a book called The Vintage Geek Quiz Book, which we're going to talk about. He's also an amazing artist. I shared out his Etsy page earlier this week as we were getting ready for the show. We will encourage you to find that as well and check it out. But I am excited to bring in my friend from across the pond, Mr. Marshall Julius. Marshall.
Hello. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
It is so wonderful to have you on. It's so wonderful to make these international connections. And I appreciate the fact that for you, it's almost 9:30 at night and that you're willing to take some time and hang out.
So late. It's so late. I'm trying to get the lights on because I'm just so in shadows. But any more light and it reflects horribly off this bowling ball head of mine. So it's like, let's go with slightly shadowed. It's just
that's right. Slightly shadowed. It works. It totally works. You look good. And we get to hang out today and we get to talk Star Wars.
Yeah, which is like my favorite thing to do. So thank you very much for having me on your show.
It's my pleasure. Well, we have to get this important business up front because Podcast of the Wills is nothing if not consistent most of the time. And so what I have decided, and if you've seen any of our other shows, what I have told people is I'm trying to become the Stanley Tucci of Star Wars podcasts, because Stanley Tucci over the period of quarantine has been putting on these amazing videos on Instagram where he makes these really fancy cocktails and he's wearing like a blazer and just making it look really elegant. And so I decided that's what we were going to do on this show, is that when I have guests on, we're going to make a cocktail, we're going to name it after our guest, and it's just going to be something fun to get us started. So what we are doing today, I have my glass right here, a little bit prepared. I have a big chunk of ice and some orange in it. That's all we've got so far. I'm going to add just a little dash of simple syrup because I don't like too much sugar in my cocktails. I'm going to add just a dash of bitters. We have some good old-fashioned Angostura bitters, so we're going to always have to do this where I don't spill it all over my computer. And then the most important ingredient, bourbon whiskey. And I have mine in my traditional Star Wars decanter, which is an empty bottle that I put stickers all over and I refill because it just stays on brand for the show. And I'm not afraid of a good pour of whiskey.
That is an excellent pour of whiskey.
So we're going to get this. We're going to give it a little shake. In the United States and around the world of cocktails, we would probably call this an old fashioned by the ingredients. But today we have called this Marshall's Geeky Drinky. Is what we are having today.
I'm honored. I have to admit, I thought I had more of those ingredients in the house than I did. So I had to make a few substitutions.
That's okay. We appreciate
a really nice Scotch whiskey, but instead of the sweet stuff, the Angostura bitters and the orange peel, I used an ice cube. So I basically got Scotch.
I appreciate it. Cheers to you, my friend.
Cheers. Cheers. I really just horribly failed in your cocktail challenge.
No. It's okay. That's the beauty of the cocktail challenge. We go with what works because a good cocktail is a good cocktail no matter what.
Well, for me, a good cocktail is Scotch in a glass with an ice cube.
I totally get it. And to be perfectly honest, until I started doing this bit on the show 8 or 9 or 10 weeks ago, my go-to was some bourbon in a glass with a piece of ice. So I'm not that far behind you. And in fact, I've kind of unintentionally slowly grown my bar supplies just a little bit, because when I find one of these recipes, I'm like, oh, I don't have simple syrup. Oh, I don't have bitters. And so I've bought them, and now I almost have what resembles a little bit of a bar.
So it's
But
basically just an excuse to keep buying alcohol.
it is. It is. And in fact, we have our friend Jackson in the chat. He says, early drinking, I see. I approve.
Well, it's 9:30. It's 9:30
That's right.
p.m. here, so I'm like in the sweet spot of drinking.
That's
now.
right. It's not early for you, and that's okay. Well, Marshall, we've got you here. We're going to talk a little bit, and what I love to do with my guests is to start out with kind of your Star Wars origin story. When you first saw Star Wars, what that was like. Tell us a little bit about that, if you don't mind, sir.
I certainly don't mind. I first saw Star Wars in 1977. Well, okay, that said, in England, it came out at the end of the year. It came out like December 28th in England. So you got it like May the 25th. I remember those dates very clearly because, Star Wars wasn't a thing until it became a thing, until it actually came out and everyone went crazy about it. We were aware that something was coming, but then, in England, we got reports. I remember seeing on the news like reports of people queuing up around the block to see the movie, and it was like, I have to see this, I have to see this. But we had to wait all through the year. You had your Star Wars summer. I would say we had our Chewbacca Christmas. So I probably actually didn't see it until early January 1978, and I went to see it at the Odeon Leicester Square, the West End of London, which is kind of the best place to go and see movies. It's got the biggest, fanciest cinemas, and it was at the time big films in England would open first in London for a few weeks, and then they would go to all the local cinemas. So when Star Wars was only showing at one cinema in the whole country, as far as I was concerned, I went with my mum and queued up and went to see it. And honestly, more than watching the film itself, which I remember bits and pieces of when I first saw the film, but more significant to me, the thing that I remember more clearly was when we came out of the film, there were all these tables lined up between the exit of the cinema and the exit, were to go out on the street, and they were just covered in Star Wars merchandise. It was just incredibly thrilling. There were programs and posters, and just the very first wave of any sort of merchandise. And my mum bought me like a ton of it, and that shockingly is what I remember more than actually seeing the film itself the first time. I remember the Death Star trench. I get flashes of seeing that when I was small, but I remember so clearly coming out and seeing all that merchandise. It has such a powerful effect on me, all that amazing stuff. And I've got pictures of me I had the Chewbacca, I had the C-3PO and R2-D2 poster of them standing in the desert. I had the Darth and the stormtroopers standing, from the beginning of the movie. I had posters like everywhere. I still got the program. Those posters fell to pieces because I just had them on my wall. It wasn't like, oh, I got to save this. This is mint first generation sort of nonsense. I was like, that poster is going up on the head of my bed, and I was so proud of it. So that was my Star Wars origin from the moment I saw it.
And how old were you when that happened?
I was 9.
Okay.
9, and that just absolutely. Honestly, it just like changed everything. I had very strong nerdy tendencies, and I liked stuff for years before that. For instance, when I was very small, I was kind of into anything with robots or spaceships or Star Trek and stuff. But seeing Star Wars was like, okay, that gave me something to pour all of that sort of passion into that thing, because it was not just a fantastic film that I became obsessed with and had to know everything about. It also became the focal point for me for collecting as well. Absolutely. And to just pick up every last little thing. As you can see, I actually haven't stopped. It's not just Star Wars that I collect, but it's the main part of it for me.
That's awesome. Well, and you talked about the program. So you still have the original program that you got when you saw it in 1977, your version?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I've got. I'm. I've never been very good at throwing things away, and since I was, and since I was small, I always just saw the value in stuff. Like I was always kind of like I kind of have this line where I say I was sort of born nostalgic. I was born sort of appreciating the value of things. Which is kind of a weird quality to have in a 6 or a 7-year-old, that you kind of see something and it's like, I did play with it. I'm a relentless, unapologetic unboxer of stuff. I don't really get stuff so that it can be valuable 50 years after I'm dead. But I just have this kind of urge to gather and to display. You know, I remember. It was about the same age. I was probably like 8 or 7 actually, and everybody was obsessed with Coca-Cola bottles and the shape of Coca-Cola bottles. You know, incredibly iconic. And there was this summer when everybody was getting like necklaces with the little bottles in, and you know, the jewelry. And I didn't have any of that. I wasn't really interested in that, but I went with my dad to the off license where you buy drinks and alcohol and soft drinks, and he bought a whole crate of these Coca-Cola bottles. Obviously, you don't get them in glass anymore. It's like completely different. But I said to him, I asked him if I could have one, and he said, "Sure. What do you want it for?" I said, "I just want to keep it as an ornament." And I thought he was going to say, "And don't be ridiculous. That's food. You don't, you know, it's not an ornament." But he was like, "Yeah, sure. Here you go." He probably thought it's better to give in to me than to argue with him. And I've still got that. You know, I've still got that Coke bottle.
That's fantastic.
You know?
Well,
and
so
it just became, you know, this kind of something I'm very kind of sentimental about, because I don't want to get all kind of maudlin here, but my dad passed away kind of shortly afterwards, and so that was just something that made a big impression on me. I just thought that was very cool that he let me have that, you know, Coke bottle. It's, you know, you never know what little thing is going to be incredibly significant to a kid, you know, and
without a doubt.
So, you know, that's just something that I kind of really treasure. And that's basically me. I'm just a big sentimental goofball. And Star Wars is just one of the main things that I just feel incredibly attached to, you know. Like I said, my dad died shortly before the film came out. So, you know, it kind of, it was the distraction that I needed at exactly the right time. And I think it sort of saved me in a way.
No doubt. Well, and you bring up such an interesting point when you talk about being sentimental about collectibles, saving things that are special to you, because like my kids have stuff and we have toys and we're constantly having a birthday and getting new toys. And 3 weeks later, we're not paying attention to those toys anymore. We're not saving them, and we're constantly getting rid of or donating or whatever it is. But there are those moments when one of my kids is like, no, I really want to save this McDonald's Happy Meal box because I think it's cool. And the parent in me that has to constantly keep our house cleaned up is going, it's just trash. It's going to end up on the floor. But then I have to catch myself and stop and think about all the Star Wars things that I had as a kid that I don't have anymore, because either they got thrown out, or I talk about, we moved a couple of times when I was in the 3rd grade. And so a lot of that stuff was lost. And so I've had to kind of recollect as an adult some of the things either that I did have as a kid or I wished I had as a kid. And so finding that balance with my kids of saying they really want to keep this is important to them. Or, you know, my wife grew up with My Little Pony. And so when I went to a toy convention in Atlanta a couple of years ago, I found for relatively cheap, well played with, well loved, but some original 1980s My Little Ponies. And I brought them home to her. And it was one of those things. She was like, I'll keep these forever. They weren't really mine, but I'll keep them forever because it's still that nostalgia, you know, that vintage connection. And like you said, the sentimentality of it. When I started, I guess 4 years ago, when I kind of decided to start recollecting some of the Star Wars things that I had or whatever, the first thing that I went after was my vintage Han Solo blaster, because I had this toy as a kid And it was the thing that I remembered the most. I remembered how much I loved that toy, running around playing with it. And so that was, and of course, the glory of eBay is that you can find almost all of it somewhere if you're willing to pay for it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I've got most of what I got as a kid. I was kind of lucky in that my mum was a kind of quite a big nerd herself and understood how attached I was to these things. And so never sort of, I hear so many horror stories from people who come and, and see my den and they see my stuff and, their eyes sort of like well up and they go, oh, I had that, or I had this. And then, I went to university and my mum cleared out my room, or I sold it when, I kind of, there was a time when I thought, oh, I don't want my kids' stuff anymore and I'm going to get rid of it. And then, a few years later, I kind of realized what a terrible mistake it was. And it was like, sucks to be you, mate, because, I just kept everything.
Absolutely.
I'm just never going to throw away anything. Look, I mean, right in front of me on my desk, I have my my official
membership
Star Wars
card.
Fan club card.
That's so amazing.
From 1983. It's very important to be a card-carrying member.
That's
of the
right.
Star Wars
You because one day when you get something wrong on Twitter, which is bound to happen, and all the mad nerds demand that you turn in your fan card, you actually have one that you could turn in.
I'm not going to turn in anything, but yes,
no.
quite right. In fact, good story about that card is a couple of years ago, they had Disney through this big worldwide event where they were unveiling all the new Star Wars toys for the last movie and the last trilogy, and it was this big event. I'm in London. I went to go to Pinewood Studios. I got invited along to it, and there were lots of cool people there. Warwick Davis was there. I gave him a copy of my Vintage Geek book, which was a really nice moment. Awesome. And but when we arrived, they said, right, and you can only get in if you have like official ID. Like they were being very careful security wise, and so they said everybody has to show official ID. So I go along, and I actually brought my Star Wars fan club card, and I thought, I got my I've got official ID. I've got like my driver's license and stuff. Sure. But I thought I'm just going to try it on and see if I can show them my official Star Wars ID. And so there was this, there was this girl at the door, and she was like, 20 or something. And I gave her my card, and I swear I didn't say anything. And she looked at it and she saw my name that I'd written on when I was 14. Sure. And she handed it back to me. She did, thank you very much. And I got in using my Star Wars fan club card. So it was that was like a really good start to an amazing night, I got to say.
I can't imagine that. That's a great story. And that's a great, how did you get in? I got in with my official Star Wars fan club card.
Yeah, as far as I was concerned, that was the best ID of anyone had all night. It's
that's right.
I don't need to show you my passport. I don't need to show you my papers. This is it. This is my.
That's right. Well, and if that hadn't worked, I hope you were prepared just to wave your hand and say, "You don't need to see my identification."
That would have been my second move.
Yeah, that would have been the next move, but luckily you didn't need it. Well, that is so neat. And so obviously you grew up with the original trilogy. I have heard you on some other shows, and we're not going to get into it deep, but I know you have big feelings about the prequel movies.
I do. I just, it's like, how long did we wait? It was the first one came out in, what was it, 1999?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you're talking about a 16-year gap.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to think for younger people that there's always some new Star Wars thing coming on, because as soon as really from a few years prior to that, with the special editions, there was always some new Star Wars happening, always some new Star Wars or TV show and stuff. But after Return of the Jedi, there were 13 very lean years before the special editions, and honestly, I prefer the original versions to the special editions anyway. But I had high hopes for the prequels. Of course I did. Everyone did. It was many years of anticipation. And I just say that I was disappointed. I've actually not seen any of the prequels. I've only seen them all once at the cinema. and felt very, very disappointed and angry, and I've never watched them again.
Oh wow. Well, that's awesome, and I admire that because you know what you want, you know what you're looking for, and I think the difference is, I've laughed, and I'll be the first to admit I laughed out loud on multiple shows that you were on, listening to some of your commentary about those movies, and it does make me laugh. And I think the difference is, and you've seen this as a avid Twitter user too, the difference between that and, being of an age where, like I wasn't there for Star Wars, but I was born by the time Empire was out. I saw Return of the Jedi as a kid actually we saw it at a drive-in movie theater in Illinois. But so that's what I grew up with. I grew up with the original trilogy. I like to say I've literally had Star Wars my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
There's never been a time when I didn't have it. And so to go through what we call the dark time, and I read the old EU books, and I read, Timothy Zahn and Kevin Anderson, and that was my Star Wars continuation.
Mm-hmm.
So like you, when we found out, I was in college when halfway through college when the prequels came out, I was excited. We're getting more Star Wars. And so it was that build up, and it was that emotional, like, this is a thing that's meant so much to me. Here it comes. The difference is between then and even the feelings I had about those movies, and, have changed some over time. Seeing them with my kids makes a difference. Seeing them in light of the world and how toxic the world can be now. And this is where I was going with Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
Both with the prequel trilogy and the sequel trilogy. The reality is, and this isn't for you, but for these people that we do see who are very toxic in the Star Wars fandom, if it makes you that mad, you should just move on. It didn't make you so mad that you have to complain on Twitter and you have to hate people and that you just went, that wasn't what I wanted. It's not for me.
Oh yeah. Well,
and you're able to laugh about it, which I think is the other part of it, where, you're not ready to burn something down because it didn't go the way you wanted it to.
No, I think toxic. I think Twitter and social media can be terribly toxic. It's not the platform; it's the people on it, obviously.
Right.
Because I like to think of my kind of Twitter feed, particularly as a sort of an oasis of nerdy calm, a sort of a safe place. Sure. I look. So sometimes I'll watch something and I won't like it, and I will say so. It's a place where I think I like to be honest, and I invite everybody to be honest. But I'm not going to like scream and shout at you. If you like the prequels, I'll quietly judge you, but I won't, I won't say anything, I won't.
But that's to be admired too.
Yeah, I won't go, too deep into it. I think that people get like so angry that they don't like something that you like. I mean, I think that's just so stupid. And
that's right. And the bottom line is, you could say, you know what, it's not for me. I'm glad it's for you. It's not for me, and we can move on. And that's
I think that's basically what you have to do. It's like,
I think
there are more important divisions. There are more significant things that people can do to make me actually properly judge and not want to know them.
For sure. And
it's not really a problem for me if they like the prequels. That said, most of my friends, most of my closest friends are or similar age and have similar experience and aren't crazy about the prequels either. Sure. Then Force Awakens comes along, and it felt like, we were kind of getting Star Wars back a bit, and that was exciting to me. The films, that rounded off the trilogy, I can't say that I was particularly thrilled with them either. But then we got the Mandalorian, and it felt to me like we got like Star Wars back proper. Like to me, the Mandalorian is it's like proper Star Wars, proper old school Star Wars, and I think that works because they appreciated all the things. It's just generational, probably about similar age to Jon Favreau, and the things that they grew up loving and being obsessed by. They identified it and they just made more of it, and obviously,
and there's
obviously there's a lot of CG and stuff, but it's balanced. It's used to help tell the story, unlike the prequels, where it was just like, everything has to be CG.
George just turned himself loose. George just turned himself loose, and there was no one there that said, "Are you sure about this, George?" He just went for it.
Yeah, I think in
well,
my experience as a film critic, actors, directors, often shouldn't be so powerful that they don't have any people around them who will say, actually, I don't think that's a good idea. You know, when George Lucas was making Star Wars, he was surrounded by friends and peers, other filmmakers, great filmmakers who were saying, "Oh no, I think you need some help with the dialogue," or "George, you can't, that can't be the opening crawl. We have to rewrite it." What Brian De Palma rewrote the opening crawl, and
that's right.
And there were so many people there who were helping him and saying, "No, that is crazy. You can't do that." And that's why it just became a great movie. It was just
and I think one of the things that intrigues me so much is when you hear, and there was a great podcast series that was released maybe a year or more ago. I think it was called Blockbuster, and it was a limited series kind of digging into the origins of Star Wars and what Lucas did. And to hear, and we've heard it even just in the lore of Star Wars, but you had George Lucas hanging out, like you said, with Brian De Palma and Coppola and Spielberg and these people who were his peers and contemporaries. And you hear about, him showing them the cuts of the film to get their thoughts and opinions on it. And those were some of the few people that he had that went, yeah, I don't know about this. And, giving him some of those doses of reality early on. And that was for the original trilogy. But then it changed when he went to the prequel trilogy because, of course, he was established. He was George Lucas. And it was the chance. And I don't fault him for saying, I want to do the vision I have in my head. But he still could have used somebody to go, George, what worked so well were those practical effects and that lived in world and that, those other pieces. And so that's what I think, coming back to your point about The Mandalorian, is so fantastic, is that you have Jon Favreau, who in his own rights is a fantastic storyteller. It has an eye towards the technology and bringing in the things that they're doing, like the volume. And then you have Dave Filoni, who literally studied at the feet of George Lucas and, mentored and apprenticed with him. And he was picked essentially by Lucas because he went, this guy gets it. He gets the lore and the storytelling part of it. So to have those two guys, and I love, and it may have even been in one of the behind the scenes episodes they did on Disney Plus after that first season of The Mandalorian, talking about how Filoni and Favreau are basically, you and me as grown-ups taking the toys that we had as kids and going, what if we had made an episode where this thing happened? Like, they were building their sandbox playtime into an episode.
Oh, yeah.
But what you have is, and I think this is one of the things I admire so much about The Mandalorian, is they're bringing in all these different directors. You've got Bryce Dallas Howard, you've got Robert Rodriguez, you've got these different viewpoints, Deborah Chow, Taika Waititi, all these people, but with a guiding hand overhead, like Filoni and Favreau, to go, I want you to put your spin on it. That episode in season 2 with Boba Fett that Robert Rodriguez directed, the action in that was so specific and so not Star Wars. It was through the eyes of Robert Rodriguez, but he had the ability to bounce ideas off of Favreau as the overseeing person to go, yeah, that feels right. Or are we sure we want to do it? The collaboration aspect of new Star Wars is what excites me so much, is to be able to.
I think that's that old Star Wars worked because it was a collaboration.
Right.
The prequels didn't work because they were basically one person doing everything he wanted to do, and I'm afraid he was just turned to the dark side, and there was like nobody to pull him back. The Rodriguez episode, was that the tragedy? Was that the one where they meet Boba Fett, wasn't it?
Yes.
So that's a fantastic episode, and I remember when we saw the name of the episode, it's like, what's the tragedy? That's right. Something happened to Baby Yoda. It's like, what can be the most terrible tragic thing that happens? And then of course his ship blows up and
they blow up the Razor Crest. Yep.
It's like, that's the tragedy. And it was like every Star Wars fan who that is the coolest spaceship I've seen in 20 years. And it's like, you blew it up, you monsters.
Well, and as
the
kind of
tragedy.
It was, and as the era of Star Wars fan that I am, honestly, it was the counterpoint to what I was afraid of in The Rise of Skywalker, which is we were going to get that, but for the Falcon, because I don't know if I would have been able to handle it if the Falcon had met its end and received that kind of tragedy. So it may have been their way to kind of, shift a little bit, but the Razor Crest is that ship. You have certain ships in Star Wars that are characters themselves. The Falcon certainly is one. Slave One certainly is one. And in a short period of time, the Razor Crest became one of those ships that could stand alone on its own. TIE fighters, there's lots of them. X-Wings, there's lots of them. But there are certain key ships that you go, "Ooh, I'd really be upset if something happened to that." And
yeah, that was tough saying it. I just hope that somebody rich in the show gives him a new one in series 3.
Right.
That's
right. There's going to be something.
To get an exact replacement ship. I want that ship again because it was.
That's right, and it'll have some of those quirks like the Falcon did. Like you can't ever quite get it to start upright, and he has to hit the bulkhead. Or there'll be something that works with that.
And it has to have the little unscrewable knob for Baby Yoda to play
for Baby Yoda, no doubt. So you came up through those times. You came up through the prequels. We talked a little bit about the sequels, but I want to talk about your work a little bit because, like you said, you have been a film critic. You're an author. You're an artist, and there's so many neat components of that feed into Star Wars. And there's certainly that work, as I would no doubt guess, are informed by your love of Star Wars to be able to want to critique film. You've written a trivia book, like you said. It's not strictly Star Wars, but there are Star Wars elements of it. And then, like I said, you have an amazing art page. So talk about some of your career, some of your work, and certainly how that's been informed by Star Wars.
Well, when I started, I started at 18. I got a job. I didn't go to university. I got a job on a magazine called What's On in London. And it was paid for by advertising. They weren't really particularly bothered about what were in the editorial pages. And so as long as we filled up the pages, it was a listings magazine. So basically, if you wanted to know what was at the cinema, what was in the theater, it was mainly pitched to tourists. So I was able to, kind of let loose and pursue all the sort of people who I was interested from when I was, like 19 years old, when I kind of realized the position that I was in. When a film came out, I was able to, kind of interview the filmmakers, usually the filmmakers, sometimes the actors, but the directors were usually a bit more accessible. But, beyond that, I made good contacts with like Forbidden Planet and different kind of publishers, and I was able to kind of parlay that into meeting a lot of my heroes. Like I went to Ray Harryhausen's house a couple of times to interview him. I interviewed Adam West. I interviewed so many of my TV heroes and film heroes from decades earlier, and people who were whose careers were sort of off the boil and so that much more available. And as far as the world was concerned, they weren't maybe as hot as they'd once been, but to me they were like gods. And
Absolutely.
the chance, cast members of Star Trek and just incredible filmmakers and writers, and I just had an absolute ball. Just the best time, and that's gone now. The opportunity to do that is gone. I mean, when my elders, journalists who I know, that they would go, they would have often proper personal relationships with the talent, with filmmakers and the actors. They would go to their houses, they would spend a day with them by their pool, and they had access like you wouldn't believe. But to me, I used to get like an hour, like they would install the person in a hotel and in a hotel room, and you would get like an hour with them, and they would go, okay, and here's John Malkovich and here's Antonio Banderas, and there weren't PRs standing over you looking at their watches, kind of like, okay, your minute is up. So I met lots of wonderful people, Christopher Lee. I interviewed Gary Kurtz, and wow. I started to meet Star Wars people, And towards the end of kind of my main kind of journalism career, I suppose interviews became these 5-minute, 3-minute filmed things that you would do for online. I became the editor of Blockbuster Online and ran that company into the ground. I'm not going to take full responsibility, but by the time that interviews became like these 3-minute things where you would literally have publicists standing, in your eye line behind the person you're interviewing. And after like 2 minutes, they're like, tapping at their watch, or they're doing wrap it up. When you have to go in, you've got no time to establish a rapport. It's just,
right.
It just took all the fun out of it. I don't know if I don't know how much worse interviews can get going forwards. I think there'll be maybe like 15 seconds or something, and you won't be able to look at the person. You'll have to like wear a mask, or they'll be or it'll have to be, you'll have to ask the question to the publicist, and then they'll ask the person, and then they'll get the answer, and then they'll give you the reply, and then they'll say, okay, that's all the time you have. And
no more eye contact.
It's definitely sort of lost its appeal. Anyway, I suppose that in more recent years, I kind of focused more on what came before than what was coming out. I'm always interested in new film. I'm not one of these people who say they don't make them like they used to. I mean, they don't make them like they used to, but they still make great movies. But I'm just more interested in writing about the things that I love and the things that mean something to me. So I put together this book, Vintage Geek, the quiz book. It is a quiz book, but on the other hand, it's also like a trivia guide. And I don't like the word trivia because it sort of diminishes what it is. And actually, it's the behind the scenes stories of so many things that I love. I don't think of that as kind of trivial, but so if you don't know a lot about it, you can just read it as a making of sort of guide, a sort of random facts about. And so yes, there's a chapter about the original theatrical releases of Star Wars. I also have a chapter of questions on Tom Baker's Doctor Who and 1960s Star Trek, and also the George Romero's zombie movies. I've got the original Atari console. I've got questions about that. I've got the Marvel in the 1960s, the kind of Marvel age, and there's a lot of the kind of key things that I think formed the different bits of me. But yeah, my Star Wars chapter is obviously something that was particularly close to my heart, and there was no way I was going to write a book without having a significant Star Wars presence. I was particularly excited when, after getting the contract to do it, I had this idea about asking a bunch of celebrities for questions. I thought that would give it that would give it a bit of an edge. It's something a bit that that nobody else has done. I'm lucky to have a really healthy following on Twitter, including lots of people I admire, lots of filmmakers and writers and directors, actors, and I was able to reach out to a lot of them who maybe then kind of question the wisdom of following me on Twitter, because then suddenly I'm like reaching out to them saying, would you write a question, would you give me a question for the book? And it was like so many of them said yes. It was incredibly exciting, and I got questions. I got a whole chapter about John Carpenter horror movies, and I got a question from John Carpenter for that. I got Sam Neill gave me a question for In the Mouth of Madness. I got a Star Wars question by Mark Hamill. I got a Star Trek question by George Takei. It's like Clancy Brown gave me a question about Highlander, and Sam J. Jones gave me a question about Flash Gordon. I mean, I was in like absolute nerd heaven. It was like I couldn't believe it. In all, I got like 50 amazing guest questions. And,
Mm-hmm.
at first I thought, okay, there's 1,000 questions in the book. If I get them to give me a question, then that'll be 50 less questions I have to write. Easy. But, each question involved so much, a lot of chasing and
for sure.
wrangling and stuff, but it was all worth it when I finally put it all together.
Well, and it feels like that classic, the cliche is it's a labor of love. It's something that you love to do. It's a trivia that you're interested in, science fiction, all of those things. And you get to do it. And you get to have, not only Star Wars, but like you said, Doctor Who. And I love, too, thinking back on the people you're talking about. You've got Tom Baker, who was the Doctor, and then he's also in Star Wars Rebels as Bendu. You have Clancy Brown, who, Highlander, but then also Clancy Brown is in The Mandalorian. And
yes, amazing, isn't it? Everybody's
the overlap now. The overlap of how, the cultures that cross over and the people who, that's a guaranteed go-to person. That's somebody who, it's like, honestly, it's kind of like Simon Pegg on a level. Like, he did a bunch of Star Trek stuff, wrote some Star Trek, was in Star Trek, but he's also in Force Awakens and he loves those things. And so to have, those feels and connections and connecting points in fandom is what makes it fun. It doesn't have to be just Star Wars. It can be all these other things. And we see that, back in the days when we could go to conventions, it didn't have to be just Celebration. It could be San Diego Comic-Con, which covers everything. Or, honestly, like you said, the Ramiro stuff.
Yeah. I like too many things to really want to focus on just one, kind of franchise. I mean, Star Wars is like my first love and kind of my biggest love, collection wise and geek wise. But I'll talk equally passionately about James Bond, Connery and Roger Moore. I got a chapter on the Roger Moore years of James Bond, which I really enjoyed putting together because it's like got to rewatch all those movies. Not that I need an excuse to rewatch James Bond films.
I would say we can always go for James Bond, right? Well, and so that's so fantastic. And we're going to get into the trivia part again in a minute with our top 7, but I want to focus on this as well. And I'm going to pull this up on the screen just for a minute because you are an artist. And
let's use that term sort of semi loosely. I got over the lockdown. I got into drawing a bit more. I've always been sort of enthusiastic about it. I never really regarded myself as having any particular kind of drawing talent, but I sort of like practiced and I kind of got into this crazy sort of rainbow color scheme where I did it all as cross hatching and they kind of got more sophisticated and I got some really nice feedback about it. I put them on t-shirts. There's a company, Hot Merch, that you can put, most of those are available on t-shirts. Then I opened my own Etsy store and they're available as stickers and magnets. And, because I love merchandise, so I figured it would be fun to sort of make some of my own. But I love those guys.
Oh, absolutely.
That R2 and that 3PO. I'm really proud of those.
Well, and I picked those two, and we talked about this before we got online. Those are two of my favorites because R2 is one of my favorite characters, but I just love how this C-3PO turned out and the way you did it. But the other thing that I think is so neat, and for those that are watching and those for our audio podcast listeners, you'll have to come back and catch the video on YouTube and check it out. But it's not just Star Wars drawings, and that's important to say because you've got Ed 209, which that's a fantastic one from RoboCop.
Thank you.
You have the TARDIS. You have the what's the
it's
robot?
All robots, basically. Yeah,
it's mostly robots, and so that's
Maximilian from the Black Hole, and I just basically Rosie from the Jetsons. I've got a lot of Doctor Who robots, Cyberman and K9 and Daleks, of course. And I just started branching out. I got in kind of more organic characters. I did a Baby Yoda and I've got Elisa Simpson and And yeah, so I just kind of enjoy it and doing it and just having a go. I found it actually very therapeutic during lockdown to be able to do these things and to be really obsess over all the colors and what goes where. And it takes to be able to stay in the lines and to do that cross hatching as finely as I possibly could. And I just found it incredibly satisfying. The fact that people now kind of get merchandise with that stuff on is also very exciting. We're going to get reviews on the Etsy store is called Vintage Geek Art, and we started getting some really nice feedback from people, and it's just I love that. I really love the idea that I've produced. I mean, not just my book, but also kind of stickers and magnets, just things, just nice things that people want to put on their water bottles or magnets for their fridges, and how it's become part of their collections. And I think that's I'm very, very kind of excited to create a few bits and pieces that people like.
It really is fantastic, and it's an art style that is uniquely yours, which I love. And the fact that, like you said, it's primarily droids and robots, but it branches out a little bit. But that's what art is. Art is where you feel led and where you feel inspired. And this was something that inspired you. And I remember back earlier, again, last year about this time when, pandemic was hitting, and I had heard you on other shows, but I heard you talk about this, and I saw, I was following you. And so I'd see when you'd put up new ones that you had done. And it appealed to me too, for kind of those same, like, it's an outlet. It's a way to express yourself again, while we're all at home, while we're all, doing whatever. And so, in fact, I even think I heard you talk about at one point, like your daughter was involved in some of this process.
Yeah, I just couldn't get the dimensions of the K9 right, and she drew the K9 for me, and I colored it in. So that's our joint project. But Phoebe is
so special.
She's a great little artist, and she's done. She's better than me. But I just I'm the one with the Etsy store. So.
That's right. Well, and you have the keys to the gate, so you help get her there, and everybody wins.
She's great. The fact that it's something that we could do together, kind of that just made it, kind of even more special.
Without a doubt. Well, we're gonna after the show's over, in this and in the notes for the podcast, we will put the links to your store because we want our listeners to go check that out. Like I told you, I've got an order I need to get ready to place, some stickers, some other things, because I love this style. You did a K2SO also, right? Is there a K2?
No, not yet.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to put in a request for.
Yes, I did. Absolutely.
Okay. I thought I saw one.
Yeah. Sorry. What am I thinking? Yeah. No, that was a commission, and I was really, really happy to do that. And so the art itself has been sold, but I do have stickers and magnets of that, and I was really, really sorry. I mean, what?
Well, you've done so many, and that's
all robots are initials and letters and numbers.
That's right. It's all ones and zeros. Exactly.
But yeah, so, I mean, it's like there's a K1 and a K9 in Doctor Who alone, and I just did both of those. So sometimes I just have to like take a breath.
Sometimes we just need a robot to be named like Robert, just to make it easier to remember.
Basically, or robot, like in the B9 robot in Lost in Space. Everybody just thinks his name is Robot. So I did one of him, and I've also got a Robbie the Robot.
See, there you go.
I love those robots,
Yes, the robots are fantastic.
Robbie the Robot is my all-time favorite movie robot. Just my all-time favorite robot, kind of period. I just think that it's just a thing of beauty. If I could have any one robot, but the real robot, it would be Robbie, because for one thing, he can manufacture diamonds and whiskey in his stomach. So it's like I can't.
What do you need more than whiskey and diamonds?
Nothing. I'd be happy, honestly,
You're set.
just with whiskey and diamonds my whole life. That's all
the rest
I need.
Of it would
I'm
be
a simple man. Whiskey and diamonds.
I like it. Well, as we have talked about the art, we've talked about the trivia, we've talked about kind of your background. What I want to pivot to now is our top 7 list. And this is the other kind of consistent feature of our show. And I put this out a little bit on Twitter. I try not to talk about it too much because, of course, I'm nervous now because this is the part where I have to perform just a little bit. But what we're going to do is we're going to do Marshall's top 7 Star Wars trivia questions. We went back and forth about what would be a good top 7 list. And I like the idea of this. And so the spin that I decided to put on this to make it a little more different is we're going to go through Marshall's 7 questions. And as he asks each one, I'm going to try and see if I can answer it. I am a longtime Star Wars nerd. I am a Star Wars pub trivia champion. 2 Decembers ago now, and there's a clarification here. I live in Montgomery, Alabama. I may have been only one of 2 people who competed that night after a certain point. But we went to like 3 overtimes. I won on the odds of navigating an asteroid field, which of course is 3,720 to 1. And I went with me and my buddy Matthew. Shout out to Matthew if he's watching this afternoon. And he will be the first one to tell you he contributed nothing to trivia that night. He was there to drink beer and support me while I tried to answer these questions.
Well, that's a noble endeavor, and I'm sure
it is.
He was very successful.
And he was the runner, but he was the runner because when we got down to kind of the overtime at the end, I was sitting at the table like I was some big deal, just telling him the answer while he ran to tell it to the trivia master and to come back and forth. That was his contribution. We ended up winning, and basically we won a gift card to the restaurant that we were at that paid for the beer we drank that night. So really it was a great win. I mean, what more do you need?
Sounds like the perfect night.
But I will also qualify. I'm not a schmodown level trivia expert. I am not, hardcore competitive trivia. So I'm excited and a little bit nervous to see out of 7, how well can I do? So we're going to jump into this. And I've got the chat going on. I'm trying not to look at the chat because I know some of these smart people are going to put the answers up before I get to them.
Well, but especially if they've got a copy of my book, because I've taken these 7 questions from the book.
From the book. And that's what we're going to do. So Marshall's going to ask me the question. I'm going to try and answer it. And then right or wrong, we're going to just hear a little bit about why he chose that one. Because I know, especially with one of them, there's a great story and connecting point with a certain Star Wars personality that we're all familiar with. But let's jump in with number 7, Marshall, and let's see how well I do.
Okay. So right up until the first day of filming Star Wars, what was Luke Skywalker's original surname?
It was Star Killer.
It was Star Killer, correct. Now, what I did with my very good, very good.
First one. You're starting.
What
me out
I do
easy.
in my
I like
book
this.
is like I don't just give the answer, because I don't know any nerd worth his salt who just gives one-word answers.
That's right.
Because you give your answer, then you have to explain where the answer.
And that's why I like this for this show. So tell us about Luke Starkiller.
I always go a little bit deeper, and there are some of my answers which I go into ridiculous kind of rabbit hole detail about things. I give the answer, but then if you want, there's like another page and a half about something,
and that's totally legit.
Do you know why they changed the name from Starkiller, though?
I don't know that I know the change. The things I know about that relate to Starkiller is, of course, as we see, I'm such a sucker for concept art, and Ralph McQuarrie is one of my, all-time favorites. And in those early concept drawings, Starkiller was a female. And so that was a part of, that early lore, what it was going to be. I don't know that I know. I could see it being along the lines of like when they changed Revenge of the Jedi to say it's not really a Jedi's thing to be after revenge. Starkiller could have been a little too harsh, a little too negative. They wanted something a little more positive and uplifting, but I don't know the real answer. So do tell.
Well, I say the real answer, the answer that I believe, the answer that I've kind of put in my book, and so it must be true, is that the George Lucas and presumably the executives of Fox made him ditch the name because they were afraid that he would be associated with Charles Manson.
Oh,
Star Killer.
That's right.
Literally Star Killer.
Yes,
which is pretty bonkers.
So
but that was just one of many things that he was encouraged to change. I mean, I don't know anybody who names his characters more literally than George Lucas, but if he kind of because literally he like kills the Death Star at the end of the film. That's
right.
So it's like mate, just pull it back a little bit.
Well,
just
you go with things like Vader and Dutch's father, and he ends up being Luke's father. And so again, you do have a very literal.
Very, very literal. Very little.
I love
I mean,
that.
I'm surprised
I
he
love
didn't
that.
call him like Darth Bad Guy. But I'm glad he did.
Evil emperor worse than the other guy,
Yeah,
something like that.
Secretly the bad guy.
Secretly, been the bad guy all along.
But yeah, I think Skywalker works better than Starkiller. But there you go.
For sure.
So
and we also have in that, the uses and the nods to Starkiller as we went down the line. Of course, we had Starkiller in the video games with EA back in the 90s and 2000s. But then what we get, as far as the change in canon, is we get Starkiller Base in Force Awakens, and so you do still get and it makes sense, Starkiller Base to be called that because
3, basically,
Death Star.
They didn't want to call it Death Star again,
and it's also, as much as we love Star Wars the way you and I do, and to have the feelings we have from the original trilogy to the prequels to the sequels, and what we know about Harrison Ford and his feelings about Star Wars and wanted to have been written out and, Jedi and those kinds of things, to me, it's such a great tip of the hat in that scene in Force Awakens when they're talking about Starkiller Base, and Harrison Ford is the one that goes, yeah, it's the Death Star, but a lot bigger. Like, just to have that whole, yes, we're doing it again, but it's way bigger. Like, how much more do you need from me?
Yeah, because that's basically what it is. So it's like,
that's exactly what it is.
So this next question,
yes,
Mark Hamill wasn't following me on Twitter at the time, but he is amazing with his fans, and he and incredibly responsive. And if you kind of reach out to him, if you tweet and you tag him or you ask him a question, you catch him when he notices it, and he will reply to you. I mean, he won't, if it's just, if something sort of amuses him or catches him, then he'll do it. I've never done anybody who's more responsive to his fans than Mark Hamill, or anybody who makes himself more available or likes more people's posts. Or I mean, the guy is just, he's great in my book. And so I reached out to him. I just put out a tweet that I tagged him in, and I said, I'm working on a quiz, Star Wars quiz. I would really love it if you would contribute a question. Help me, Mark Hamill. You're my only hope. And within a couple of hours, he sent me back. He replied to me with this amazing question and answer. And so this is the next question. I'm going to word it exactly how we put
question number 6. This is my trivia question from Mark Hamill.
From Mark Hamill. What is the first thing Luke ever said to Leia?
He says, huh? Because she said, he walks in, she says, aren't you a little short from a stormtrooper? And he either says some version of either huh or what.
Yeah. What's the next bit after huh? That's spot on.
Huh? I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm here to rescue you.
He says, huh? Oh, the uniform.
Oh, the uniform. Oh.
But yeah, you're right. Technically, huh is the first thing he says.
Huh was the first part.
I'm gonna let you have that one.
The uniform. Yep. Well, I'll take half a credit on that.
Yeah, this is, as Mark Hamill says, this is in response to aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper? And a perfect trick question, because most people will reply, I'm Luke Skywalker, I'm here to rescue you. But actually he goes, huh? Oh, the uniform.
Oh, the uniform. Yes.
But you got it. You said huh. So that's just, I didn't say what was the first, 4 words, or I said what was the first thing.
Technically got the first word, but the spirit.
Yeah, I know. I think Mark Hamill and I both agree that you can get the point for that. That's like
I'm going to take half credit, so we'll call it 1.5 out of 2 at this point.
Well, that's very tough because as the quiz master, I'm giving you a point. But if you only want to take a half point, if you need that to sleep, then that's
right.
Fine.
I want to earn this, Marshall. I want to feel like I deserve my position in the rankings of all this. So
okay, so next question.
Yes, sir. Right. Question number 5. That's where we are.
So this is a quote.
Okay.
So staggering as spectacle and technically brilliant, exciting, very noisy and warm-hearted. The battle scenes at the end go on for 5 minutes too long, and some of the dialogue is excruciating and much of it is lost in noise, but it remains a vivid experience. Now, which member of Star Wars cast described the film in this way?
Wow. Which member described it in that way? That is not. That's too many words for Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford would have just been, that it's too much. Or as he famously said, George, you can write it, but you can't say it. So I'm going to rule out Harrison Ford. Honestly, to me, that feels like, gosh, because we know how brilliant she was, I feel like that feels like Carrie Fisher. That feels like the way she would look at it, what we know about her as a writer, as a script doctor, the things that she did. Because also the other choice, I mean, obviously Mark Hamill is in the mix.
I should point out that this was said at the time, not since.
Okay, not since. So, at the time.
Carrie Fisher was young, and it was
that's right. She was younger.
Movie, and so would she have been so candid? I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, and see, there's a part of me that wants to say Alec Guinness but almost it feels too involved for Alec Guinness because Alec Guinness essentially said, I don't know what's going on here. I'm just here to do this. But I'm going to go with Alec Guinness. That's going to be my answer based on the context.
Is the correct answer.
Oh, look at that. Look at that. Oh, I'm going to go to the chat now too and see if anybody's. Oh, look at that. JD said Alec Guinness. Framey said it sounds like Guinness to us too. So the chat was with me.
He got made. He became incredibly rich off the back of that. He had the best deal.
Yes, he did.
Next to George Lucas, he had like the best deal, and he was not always very. He was not always very cool about it.
That's right. He was very skeptical.
I think he could have towed the company line perhaps a little better sometimes.
That's right.
I don't like it when people are involved in a film and then they decide to slate it when they should be doing publicity for it. It doesn't seem sort of very very professional. But I'm not gonna speak ill of Alec Guinness.
No doubt. Well, let's jump into number 4. What's question number 4?
Number 4. This is a true or false question.
Okay.
2 of the asteroids in the asteroid sequence of Empire were a potato and a shoe. True or false?
That is
true. All the things floating about.
That is definitely true.
That is true.
That is a great Star Wars Easter egg, and that's one of those ones.
Have you ever spotted the potato or the shoe?
I want to say I've spotted the potato, but there's still that part of me that doubts whether I really spotted the potato or not. The shoe, I think that's
like my favorite bit of Star Wars trivia. I just think that's I thought I knew it all, or it's certainly a lot. But when I started doing research for my book, that was not something that I knew, and I just had to, check it out from several sources before I felt comfortable putting it
confident enough to put it in there.
I think, because it just sounds like bullshit, doesn't it? It's like, really,
yes, it
it's like, are you joking? That just sounds like something you would say in an interview because you're bored of doing interviews. And believe me, I've interviewed so many people, and some of them were clearly they've been doing interviews all day, and God knows what was coming out of their mouths.
That's exactly right. Well, and it also fits perfectly in line with somebody who had to work and spend grueling hours designing those effects, figuring out how to make it look. And at some point, as a little personal way to release a little bit of steam, they went, you know what? I'm going to put a potato in here and I'm not going to tell anybody. And one day it's going to be a great story, or it's going to be, my little secret because it helped me not just go crazy and walk off my job.
So are you ready for your next question?
Yes, I am. Question number 3. What do we got?
How many times is Luke upside down in The Empire Strikes Back?
Oh, how many times is Luke upside down?
And I'm not talking about flipping onto his side or something.
Sure. Like legitimately upside down.
Meaningfully upside down.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's definitely upside down in the Wampa Cave.
That's one.
He's definitely upside down when he's training with Yoda.
That's 2.
He's definitely upside down when he's hanging off the bottom of Bespin for a point.
That's 3.
That's 3. I'm trying to think.
You can stop at 3.
I think 3 is my final answer.
3 is the correct answer.
Look at me. I'm hanging in there.
Like gangbusters here.
I'm feeling good about this.
Amazing. I think we should just keep going. You're just on this incredible roll now.
Go till I lose. That's where we are. Well, we still got 2 left, so I'm feeling good that we're going to get there. What's number 2?
Okay, to throw fans and press off the scent, Return of the Jedi was shot under what false title?
Oh, false title for Return of the Jedi. I know one of the false titles, but now I'm doubting whether, because we all know Blue Harvest exists. And there's a part of me, now I'm just trying to talk myself out of it, but the reality is Star Wars, nobody knew Star Wars was a thing, so it wasn't Star Wars.
Yeah, they wouldn't shoot that under a phony title.
Yeah, they wouldn't have had that. They wouldn't have had to funny that. So I have to go with Blue Harvest because I can't think of what another one would have been.
Correct.
So is it
Blue Harvest?
Blue Harvest.
The answer. But they produced like T-shirts and stuff for the cast and stuff. Extra bonus point if you can say what the tagline for Blue Harvest was.
I know I've seen it, but I can't come up with it.
Horror beyond imagination.
Horror beyond imagination.
Which,
I like
if they'd only known, actually applied to the prequels. But they used it for Return of the Jedi, which
just that many years too soon. That's right.
Yeah. Okay, last question.
I'm feeling good. Last question. Let's see how we wrap it up.
Right. Although It's a Trap is famously Admiral Akbar's signature line in Return of the Jedi, it was spoken by which other character in which earlier movie? Who said it's a trap before Admiral Akbar?
Okay. That would have been Leia says it, doesn't she? That's my answer.
Yeah, at what point?
She says it in Star Wars because they get away from the Death Star. She says it's a trap. Obviously, they know we're here. Obviously, when they go back to Yavin, that's not it. But it was. I feel like it was Leia, but I don't have the context.
It was in Empire. Okay. When they're on Bespin,
she yells it to Luke. Luke, it's a trap.
No, it's a trap.
Yes. She's being and that high-pitched scream as they're pulling her across the thing. That's exactly what it is. So again,
let's give you half a point for that, which means what? You got like 6.
That's right. I've gotten 6 of 7. I'll take it.
Honestly, they are really they're not easy questions. I mean, obviously everything's easy if you know it, but I think the thing about my quiz book is that it's probably the hardest quiz book ever created. It's actually a bastard, and it makes people feel like they don't know anything. But if you just use it as a great trivia primer, then you will know more than anybody about everything.
Absolutely.
It's like insane. I kind of can't help but come up with tricky questions because I hate those quizzes that are just kind of too easy or that just ask most like how many languages does C-3PO speak, which now that I've said that is probably a question in my book, but you've got to have a few easy ones.
6 million forms of communication, that's what he says. So.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like once I heard that Dolph Lundgren was like trained as a chemical engineer, right? And or something like that. And then he started dating Grace Jones, and he was visiting her on the set of A View to a Kill, and they needed somebody to stand in as a tough guy, and so he does that. And then from that he spins off into this whole career as an action man, but actually he trained to be like a chemical engineer.
Yes, so he did.
I interviewed him for the Expendables or the Expendables. Yeah, I mean, gosh, those movies were just terrible,
wild.
But wild. That's a good word. So I asked my friend. I asked a very, very smart friend of mine, Jonathan, if he would give me some questions to ask a chemical engineer and to test him out. And so he gave me a few questions, and during the interview, I kind of said, I'd like to test, kind of just how learned you are about, this. Yeah. And honestly, it was horrible because he couldn't answer any of them. It was so horrible. And I thought, I'm like humiliating a guy who could lean over and kill me now. But
I'm going to push him on this one thing. I love it. Well, And I have a very, very dear friend here in Alabama who is also a chemical engineer. So that makes me happy. And if I was ever in that position, I would ask John the same things. John, give me some chemical engineer questions so I can see if this guy's legit or not. Well, this is so fantastic. And we've got a couple of questions in the chat already about where we can get your books. I'm going to put the links up. I know your book is available on Amazon.
It is. It's most easy to find on Amazon. And if anybody buys a copy of my book on Amazon, if they reach out to me on Twitter, I'm happy to send them a signed bookplate.
Absolutely.
That'd be so great. That'll kind of make it nicer. All my stuff is available on hotmatch.co.uk, all the t-shirts and stuff. My stickers and magnets and the art is all on Etsy. If you just go to Vintage Geek Art. And that's a lot to plug. I can't believe I've got so many different things to plug.
That's crazy. What we like, and that's what we're here for. Because while my footprint may be small, the internet community, the Twitter community, the Twitter Star Wars community is a great community, and we love supporting each other. We love reaching out. We love following each other, subscribing, all that fun stuff. So I will put out links on our Twitter page. After we get done, I'll put them in the audio notes for the audio version of the podcast for anybody who's listening on the audio version. We definitely want them to find you in all these places to get some of those stickers, to get a copy of the book. I need to get a copy of the book as well. And so we're going to do that. We're going to wrap up. Marshall, I cannot thank you enough for the time, getting together, having a chat with us, and we are definitely going to do this again sometime soon.
Please ask me anytime. I hope I didn't kind of witter on too much. It's like
once you
get started, I'm just like a machine, and I hope that I made some small amount of sense.
You did, and that's what makes you a good Star Wars fan and a good geek, is that you can go deep on any number of levels. And as I like to call them, the rabbit trails. We follow this one, and then we follow this one, and all of a sudden we're connecting RoboCop to Clancy Brown to Highlander to Rebels to Mandalorian. That's what it is, and that's what the fun is. So this is truly
I always felt like a really good geek can basically have a 10-hour conversation with themselves and like actually just not need other people around. It's like basically you just want other people to witness how much you know about
That's right. I just want you to be impressed about these weird things that I know that you don't care about. Well, this has been a fabulous chat. I'm so thankful that you had the chance to do this, or that we had the chance to do this weekend.
Yeah, I had fun. It was really great of you to ask me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And to all of the folks in the live chat, thank you for hanging out with us this afternoon. Thank you for your comments and your feedback. To the audio listeners, we hope you enjoy listening to this. We also hope, if you want to, go back and check out the YouTube version, subscribe on YouTube. We are available on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at WillsPod. We are youtube.com/podcast of the Wills. We're still excited that we crossed that 100 subscribers mark and are keeping going. And the biggest thing is that it makes it easier to find us on YouTube. So it's youtube.com/podcast of the Wills. So check it out. Check out the video feed. And until we get together again the next time, may the force be with you always.